So welcome everyone to our CHAOSS App Ecosystem Working Group call on April 20. Last week we had the first, thank you for posting that in the minutes. Last week we had the first official meeting as a CHAOSS, as part of CHAOSS. So right now, if you could just add yourself to the list of attendees. So let's see, what did we do last time? We talked about the background of the working group and why we started. We talked about the idea to go through the goal question metric approach as a way to structure the work that we are planning to do here. We also revisited the meeting time, but then we decided to keep it as it is right now. And we did introductions. So,
yep.
Excellent. What I think we can do today is maybe flesh out more what kind of outcomes we want to produce. Now that we have a regular cadence for meetings, we have the place where we can meet, we have a place for doing work. I think we can actually start doing work, and it would be nice to work backwards from where we want to end up to how we get there.
Yeah, makes sense.
So this is, go ahead.
Oh, well, I was also going to ask Neo if he had any insight to the types of questions that they've already asked at KDE. But I think from the last time we spoke, Neo, you said that it was basically just volunteers taking it upon themselves, so it wasn't like a strategized like endeavor. Is that correct?
Have my mic on? Yeah. Yeah, I didn't get a chance to discuss to the people that actually did some work on this on KDE. I did share a link like just earlier on one of the persons that actually is working on things like that, even though that's on his company, let's say with his company hat on and not with the KDE hat on. But yeah, there has never been like a systematic approach to community metrics inside KDE, at least not in the recent years that I'm involved. I don't know in the past. I know that over the period, because I did search it up, like there are like contributors that came and were on and off in looking into this, but nothing that actually became, let's say, a strategy and people started working on and contributing on the long term. So yeah. Nothing new to report on that.
Yeah, and thank you for sharing that blog post. I haven't read it yet, but the graphs look very interesting.
Yeah, and it kind of shares that insight from a company, let's say, perspective, but it's a company doing work in open source, so I guess there are some overlap there.
So So the mission of the working group is to build the base set of metrics that is focused on the needs of open source communities that are part of the FOSS app ecosystem. And last week, oh, Shri, hi. I saw you come in. I just want to say hi.
Hello.
Hi, Shane.
Hi.
And so last week we talked about using the goal question metric approach. So doing that, we would have to talk about what are the goals that these open source communities have, so that we can then later identify what questions we can answer with metrics to reach those goals. So what are the goals? If we can just maybe list out and just what comes to mind, and rather than talking, we can maybe talk through one of the goals, but then if you can just go into the meeting minutes and type out your goals. Oh, Shri, in case you don't have the minutes, I just put them in the chat. Sorry, I'm going back and forth and I'm all over the place. So what's a
George,
goal that...
Thank you, guys.
Yeah, by that do you mean sort of like we want to understand, you know, the size of the membership base, or the how many contributions, or the activity around contribution or something like that?
Okay, so we want to understand the size of the community.
Mm-hmm.
Also the health of the community in terms of like communities are live organizations, right? So people come in and people go out, and depending on the ratio of that, you could decide if some group or project or community is doing well in terms of growing and evolving, or like fading out.
I'd like to see like how many active contributors per module kind of deal, right? Like we may have a set of core projects in any community, right? That we are interested in seeing what the health is.
I think that's interesting. Ooh, my God, I think it's an interesting place where this is maybe different than some other projects when we talk about app ecosystems. I'm sorry, I'm creating a massive echo.
You sound fine.
Oh, okay, then I'm echoing myself.
No, I hear an echo.
Yeah, I think it's
Yeah.
Shri, if you can mute, it's probably.
Sure. Yeah, so like Sure was saying about different components of a project, and I think that's an interesting thing to look at, where the overall number of contributors to GNOME as a whole or KDE as a whole is probably very large, but when you get down into like who is maintaining the help viewer application, sometimes you have these components that are really just one person shows, and so you might have pockets of poor health.
To me also, it's important to understand the impact that various, let's say, activities of initiatives we take has in, like, let's say, new contributors joining in. And if we can track the process of these new contributors as, let's say, if they joined in the last month, how many of them stuck around for the third month and the 6th month and the year and so on. So for us, let's say now we're switching to GitLab. So will that have an impact on how many new people join our project, or how easy they find it and they stick around so they can contribute more, things like that?
So I'm trying to just, everything that you throw at me, I'm trying to capture that in the minutes. If you
And
can.
thank you for that.
Yeah.
Well, that's where I can provide value.
I think another goal would be to understand company contributions, and how many are company versus, just kind of hobbyists.
Yeah, and which companies, if it's dominated by a single company versus a number of companies collaborating together. I think that's a very important thing to look at.
Yes, that's right.
All right. So I don't know if we can already go to structure it, but just to review. One goal is we want to understand the whole of the app ecosystem and the individual components. How do we want to understand them? Is it about health? Is it about what do we want to understand? I understand that there's a distinction between the whole and individual projects. Maybe that's all this is. Maybe this is just the need to be able to drill down to project level.
Yeah, I think whatever health metrics we look at, I think that's the open question of what metrics kind of would make us think that something is under, you know, is a weakness or a threat area or something we have to improve. Whatever metrics we look at, we would want to be able to look at them on a drill down basis as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. Then the next one we have here is we want to understand the size of the community.
That's actually a good question, at least from our end. It's something that people, especially sponsors or businesses or companies, often ask you. And if you're an open source community, that's very hard to define, because we do have like regular contributors that we can say like a random, like not a random, like an estimated number based on people that attend our events and the people we know and things like that. And then you have like more regular contributors that are all over the world contributing like on their spare time and things like that. And then you have like random contributors that come in and go at any random moment. So it's very hard to actually define the number of contributors, and maybe presenting like a graphic or something like that would help you do an estimation, a much better estimation of where your community is in terms of numbers.
Yeah, and I kind of like how you explained before the newcomer story, Neo, and I think this ties in, where there are some people who contribute, you know, are new to the project, contribute, and then go away, but how can we chart that path? And so then we can define, like, you know, regular contributors if they've been putting a certain amount per year or something like that. I don't know. We can go off of that.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I do think that it's really important to capture each of those stages because it shows different parts of how healthy your ecosystem or how healthy your project is.
Okay, I added those questions. What is a regular contributor and how many regular contributors do we have?
I have another question here. I think that I'm kind of putting on my GitLab sponsor hat here, where we're also interested in not only how big is your core, like your contributor community, but also like the community that follows you. And so I wonder if we want to measure that as well, of, you know, what kind of outreach do you have? You know, we have GNOME Planet, or yeah, Planet GNOME. KDE also has their communication. So like, how many people are we able to reach through those methods?
Okay, yeah, I added this question one, what is the size of the contributing community? And question two is, what is the size of the following community? How many people can we reach?
I think it's also interesting to know, like, one-off contributors, like somebody who does one MR or one PR, and I guess really just MR in your case.
Yeah, I think those are, oh, and somebody mentioned that we shouldn't be saying drive by because it has connotations of like shooting, but drive through is a little bit better of a term.
Actually,
maybe
I just shared today an article that on a research paper about community managers and the term that they tend to use is episodic volunteers or episodic contributors. It's like less derogative, I think, and more, let's say, positive.
Or is this the research by Anne Barcombe?
Yeah, exactly.
What is it?
There's
Anne Barcombe did a PhD in
Ah.
open source,
Ooh.
and she was looking at the impact of episodic volunteers. So volunteers who are
Okay,
not
cool.
there all the time, but who come once or who come like every couple months, just show up, do
Yeah.
one thing and then disappear again. And she did a qualitative study using the Delphi method, where she had a panel of, I don't remember, 20 experts in industry and open source to share their strategies on how they deal with episodic volunteers. And she identified best practices in designing community practices and patterns to engage these episodic volunteers.
Ooh, that sounds super cool. Neo or somebody, can you send the article?
The episodic contributors sounds a lot like our translators, who tend to come
Yeah,
towards the end
sometimes.
of a release
Neo,
because
you're
that's when their
muted.
strings are finished. So they usually come at the tail end.
So yeah,
Okay.
I'm now going through my Twitter feed because I saw this.
Okay, I didn't want to derail the conversation. Sorry, it just sounds really interesting.
I'll
That's
put
cool.
it in our chat room on
Okay, thank you.
Matrix.
And I do think that these episodic contributors are part of the, I think it's great to call it out, and that it'll be part of kind of that funnel, or like identifying the different types of contributors we have. So that's super helpful. Let's see. Oh, some other questions that I think would be helpful to answer are things like how many, I don't know, there's a big theme in the community right now about identifying dependencies. And if we can like measure how many other projects depend on us or companies depend on us. I mean, I'm sure that's really difficult, but I think that's something we want to work towards.
Yeah, that's a pretty good one, actually.
Okay, I added this. Identify dependencies as the goal, and the questions are how many other projects depend on us, and how many companies depend on us. This is taking good shape.
When we say us, are we? I guess I'm a little. Are we saying specific software or skill sets, or you know, for instance, Purism depends on a lot of our designs, right? I mean, as opposed to just to give an example that isn't code, right? Which is an obvious one, but something to that effect. I don't know how you, and I'm not sure how measurable that is, but I'm just questioning the S part.
Yeah, I think I was mostly focusing on the code aspect, but open to other things as well. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm trying not to. I'm not trying not. I mean, this is one of your pet peeves too, Nurtse, is not to look at code per se, right? But to
Yeah.
look at it more holistically.
So one of the things to consider here is that we're starting from scratch. And even if we just do code base right now, we have in the back of our minds, yes, there's more and new ways to explore, but let's get one thing done and out the door and move off zero, and then we can add complexity later.
Yeah, and maybe we can just make a note of that and say, depend on project's code base. Let's see, and then in the future, maybe just like a small note to remind us of that.
Also, some of us depend on our schedule. That's another one.
Mm-hmm.
So we're also projects also depend on our schedule, like when we release.
Yeah, but I don't think that's that important to measure. Like just knowing that there are these companies that are depending on us, then it impacts us in many ways. And keeping a regular schedule, I think, is one of the ways that it impacts us, but there may be other ways. So I think it's more so first about identifying like who is it that depends on us, on our software. But I think that Sri, something that I was thinking about too that maybe helps address part of your concern is like we're really focusing on a lot of code stuff right now, but how is our community doing in terms of other skill sets? And I wonder how we might measure that, of how many designers or how many, you know, UX researchers or outreach, you know, enthusiasts are part of our community, or like what other programs do we have? I'm not sure exactly what we want to measure within that, but yeah, maybe part of it is around like the diversity of initiatives happening. And then that also kind of goes into that question of measuring diversity and inclusion in general, which Georg, you might have some good insight into what the other working groups are measuring within that. But I do think it's important to have diversity and inclusion measurements within our community.
Yes, I agree with that. I'm sorry, I'm not always responding because I'm trying to capture everything.
Oh yeah, thank you very much. Note taking is difficult.
Okay, so I identified the wholeness of skills in our project. What skill programs do we have? What is the diversity of initiatives we have? What are the different skills we have represented in our project?
Is financial, like donations, is that also something we want to consider? Because
Yeah,
financial health is also for our communities is another important aspect of our community health. How many people did we send to conferences? How many, you know, those kinds of things.
Keep going.
And I see that from a
I'll write it all down. Keep going.
So how many people did we send? Where were these events? I guess I mean, time travel.
Not just conferences, Hackfests. I remember in my time on the board,
Yeah.
Our corporate sponsors viewed Hackfest as one of the best uses of the GNOME Foundation's money, at least at that time. So conferences and Hackfest, I would say, or similar kinds of things, right? Working groups. Although we're in a weird time right now where we don't know when those will happen again. But
yeah. Also, like how many are individual donations? How many are corporate donations? How many? Maybe where, like, like general continent, if people are worried about privacy, that kind of thing.
Another one around diversity and inclusion might be around like one about geography, like where are our contributors coming from geographically. Also, in terms of underrepresented minorities in tech, you know, is there a good way to measure that? And then, let's see.
Those are all good questions.
Kind of to speak to what like Shri was talking about earlier about how many people did we send to conferences, that partially goes with the whole being able to help newcomers enter our community. So maybe that's not a specific goal or question. It's more so, how are we helping newcomers or people from, I'm thinking about people who are from lower socioeconomic backgrounds. Like, how are we helping them? Yeah. Yeah, that's good. Thanks.
Yep. And this is where we would look at mentorship programs and Google Summer of Code and right?
Yeah.
Could I ask a question real quick?
Definitely.
About the understanding financial health of the community. I noticed that all of those are related to events. Is that, generally speaking, is that the only way you think about financial health in the community, events, or are there other ways that could manifest?
So I think it's one of our primary ways we spend our money, is to send people to conferences, to create events. It's sort of how we use the money for the most part.
Well, the other areas where we use it are for supporting staff members, and I think that is an important use. And then also supporting some like swag programs or other ways to help, you know, make people feel comfortable or, you know, part of the community, and also to help them with outreach.
Yeah, and I think all of these things are worth measuring to see if the projects are aligned with their own goals. I just want to be careful not to put down kind of a top-down edict on how your pie should be divvied up, because as with any nonprofit organization, free software or otherwise, there is no one-size-fits-all right way to slice up your financial pie, you know. So, you know, might say that Hackfests are an important way to spend their money. That doesn't mean everyone has to think that.
Yep, that's true.
Yeah, definitely.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So while we're on financial health, these are all about spending. But we all know there's the other side. We need money coming in before we can spend it. Are there any questions around receiving money?
Yeah, definitely. Individuals versus, I guess, large
Corporate.
donations.
Yeah.
Corporate donations.
Yeah, and also returning donors.
Yeah, so if you have donors, how many are like monthly donations versus one-time donations? There's a lot of us have certain what's the word, fundraising for specific things, right? those are, you know, those are like how much of that is related to that, or like to those events, or versus regular, you know, that kind of thing.
Okay, excellent.
And I guess specific to know, how many are from legal battles? which we seem to be in a lot of.
Is that income from legal battles?
Believe it or
Well,
not,
we ask
they're not
for help
income.
from the community, and people will like support us through crowdfunded, you know, contributions. And
Yeah,
then
but some of them is also rewards from like the Groupon. We had a you know, some
Yeah, I wouldn't spend much time working. Yeah. I mean, it's interesting to me as a former treasurer to be able to pull reports and do that, but it's probably not a thing that you're going to change your, if we're looking at metrics as something that inform the actions you take, I'm not sure it would inform my future actions to know how much we made from getting in legal battles.
That's fair.
Yeah.
We don't want to set incentives to enter
Yeah.
legal battles.
Right, right.
but I do think it's interesting, you know, what I think what she was getting at there was really targeted fundraising of saying like, we'd like to improve privacy. Will you donate to this thing? But then foundations are sort of locked to using those funds for privacy initiatives. And so it's good to know how successful those campaigns are so that foundations or whatever can prioritize work there.
Excellent.
So maybe we can just say, oh yeah, targeted fundraising maybe instead of fundraising events. Yeah. Perfect.
Okay, so we spend a lot of time collecting questions around understanding the size of the community, and where we especially branched off into understanding the different kinds of contributors and skills, and are they regular or episodic contributors? We had a goal here, retain contributors. And the question we have here is, how long do new people stay with the community? Are there other questions that can help us retain contributors?
I don't have other, I have a meta question of, I'm not sure how to measure that, because people's level of contribution might change over time, right? So you might retain somebody, but they're not doing the kind of work level that they used to do. I don't know how important that is to measure, or if we can measure that.
Well, yeah, right now, let's not worry about how
What
we can measure it, just what are we interested in? And if we're interested in knowing what the level of contribution of people over time is, then let's record it and figure out whether and how we can measure it later.
Great.
Yep, so thank you. I added that to our list. What about like the climate or sentiment in the community? Does that help our goal to retain contributors, or is that not related?
Wait, which one? Can you say that again?
Can you repeat the question, please, Gary?
Yeah.
Oh, I was just thinking, what can help us retain contributors? And to go with a negative example, if we have a very toxic environment that people don't want to be part of, then they would leave. So if we had a way of tracking sentiment or climate or culture.
So like, you know, we get a lot of merge requests. A lot of them we use, like a lot of people use emojis. like the thumbs up emojis, but although we're now trying to figure out how to get rid of the negative ones because we don't want things like poop on there, right? I mean, but you know, like a positive emoji and versus like a disagree emoji, if there's such a thing, would be a good way to kind of tell the happiness of how something got merged or the discussion that kind of goes through there, as a way to measure how a discussion went, right? In the end. That could kind of tell you how people are feeling about, you know, core modules. And some of this, you know, we may have to look at how we organize these projects and within GitLab, so labels or whatever, right? But that's what comes to me, comes to mind immediately.
I think I've even seen research where different kinds of emojis have been assigned positive, negative, neutral meanings, and I think they're sentiment algorithms based on use of emoji. So that's definitely a kind of metric we could look at.
There's one like rather controversial topic in open source communities, at least in volunteer ones, which I find interesting, at least, is the performance issue, like topic. So how fast are people responding to, let's say, a merge request or let's say an open bug, or how quick do we close a bug, or how quickly do we respond to a comment, let's say, and things like that. Or let's say things like the ratio between open new bugs and closed bugs, or like how, in what rhythms are we closing bugs or responding to them? I don't know. Some people think that this is kind of like, these are volunteer communities and we're trying to measure their performance, and it can backfire, but I still think that are useful insights to like that we can gain from studying this.
We could apply that to Nico, to design as well, right? Like designs we put out, use those emojis.
Yeah, the place where I saw this, the Drupal community had a burn down chart for their upcoming release. Oh, this was many, many years ago, but I remember being able to see these are the number of blocking issues and it going down. And you're like, oh, I just want to close one more. Which one can I contribute to? Super motivating.
Response time to issues has been linked to retention as well. So I think that 24-hour response time means that you're more likely to retain those contributors, or under 24 hours.
And also the quality of the first response, if I may add to that. So
that actually kind of shows what roles are important as well, right? When you're looking at what kind of contributors, if your response time is low, that might mean we need a certain type of contributor who's willing to do responses. I mean, it leads to that kind of decision.
that's a long list.
It is a long list. There are so many
Oh.
things we want to know.
Yeah, and one other one, because I do think that a lot of the work that, you know, other working groups within CHAOSS are doing are so applicable, but we haven't really measured or haven't talked about risk and like business risks. I was wondering if there's anything within that, you know, category that we would want to measure.
So what is the goal here? Business risk for the project, business risk the project poses to companies?
Yeah, I think more so for the project, like what are the areas where we really need to watch out for so that we make sure that it remains strong. I don't know enough about the business risk metric within that. I was just trying to look through this. There are things like bus factor, I guess. I don't know what an elephant factor is, but I can just see how understanding that part would be.
I think I know what you mean, Ritzy. What you're saying is how comfortable is it to make any software that we maintain as a dependency in a company's project? Is I think is what you're talking about. When you start talking about bus factor, that is what a lot of like companies like Microsoft is when they're building their tool chains for their products. They look at GitLab or something or GitHub or and then they look and see what is the size of the community around an open source project to see if there's any risk in including that as a dependency, right? So if you're including an open source project that has only one developer, that's clearly a very risky move for a company to put that, incorporate that into their project tool chain. So,
Yeah.
And if I remember correctly, elephant factor is the organization version of that. Like how many organizations are engaged in a project.
Oh, okay.
Because sometimes it's not about individual people leaving, but like a company pulling their support and the project falling flat. And so you might have had 10 people, but if they all report to the same manager and that manager loses funding for the project or whatever, then all of them are going to disappear at once.
Yeah, that's a good point.
So that is another point we can have here. We had one goal. We want to know the health of the community. Now, health is a very, very big and very broad topic where a lot of different things fall under it. But other things that we have not talked about that you think of when you think of health?
Could be like things like sense of community among members. I don't know how we measure that without like long surveys or things, but yeah.
Can you say that again, please?
The sense of community, there's this measurement that you can track, let's say the sense of community that around team members. And
Yeah, like using surveys or something among
yeah, there are actually specific questions on that. So it's like a Likert scale that you can use and people answer to it, and then you can, let's say, understand the status of your community.
That's an interesting one. Yeah, sense of community, sense of belonging,
Yeah.
sense of feeling valued in the community.
Yeah, it takes all these under account.
I think that's a good one.
Do you believe another factor of community health is how much, I don't, content is not the word I want to use, but I guess what I'm saying is, how much chatter do we do as a community from a outgoing channel perspective? We're talking about blogs or Twitter, or so, that kind of thing. Like on Planet, like Planet GNOME, we have X amount of blogs. Like people are willing to. I mean, it's a part of enthusiasm, right? That we want to inform our community about the things we're doing or the projects we're working on. Or RSS feeds. I don't know, something.
Yep. So I wrote down here, how much chatter does a community produce on outside channels like Twitter or blogs? Hey, Niritzi, I saw your chat message. What is an NPS survey?
Oh, it's a net promoter survey. So it's the thing that companies send you with a 1 to 10. And it's just a really quick and easy indicator of like overall satisfaction that is easy to measure of how is your, NPS score over time. Yeah, net promoter score.
Okay, yeah, I am familiar with the concept. I just wasn't sure what NPS, the abbreviation was. Thanks.
Usually it's that if you're above 8, you're doing well. So if people are recommending your project on 8 to 10 scale, it's usually good. Below that, you have issues.
Okay, excellent. Understand company contributions, identify dependencies, wholeness of skills in the project, diversity, inclusion, financial health, performance, business risks, and make it easy for companies to choose and rely on our software. I think those are all really good goals. What other goals could we have for our communities?
I like, well, I don't know what this entails, but something that sort of measures where we like, are we, like, if we have plans, are we going where we want to go, right? For heating GNOME is maybe what is the number of desktops using our platforms? What is the stuff like that? If the app, or if you're looking at from the overall apps community, how many people are using Linux applications or using the Flatpak runtimes? In many ways, those Flatpak runtimes are easier to measure than how many people installed a desktop on their, right? So things like that.
What about like goals around having a good governance structure, leadership, how we set up the project so that it can continue for a long time, independent of individual people? Is that a goal we want to formulate?
Yeah, but we need to formulate that in terms of metrics, right? So,
well, right now I want to know what is the goal for the community, and then we can talk about metrics the next time.
Maybe you could measure, let's say, participation in the governance model. I don't know if there's a specific body, like we have AGM, I think GNOME has something similar, or things like that.
Mm. So I don't know, does that not resonate with you? If what I'm saying doesn't make sense, then we don't have to write it down.
I think, so coming in with my Red Hat OSPO hat on, governance is certainly something that we, excuse me, talk about a lot and guide projects a lot on when we are helping to spin up new projects in general, like open source projects across the board. And I think it's extremely important. But I think you might get a little bit of silence from established projects like GNOME and KDE on measuring it or on looking at it because we've done it. You know what I mean? Like we have a governance structure, and people might not feel the need to tweak it or measure or do anything with it. I might be misjudging, but.
That's an interesting comment. So yeah, we don't have to add it if that's not a concern.
Well, I'm not aware of organizational health surveys that we send out like within our communities about our leadership. I mean, you know, but I don't know if that's an option, or is that something people are interested in doing, especially with you know, the like we have more paid members, more employees in the GNOME Foundation. So, you know, maybe that's something that's warranted. I don't know.
Okay. Well, we have accomplished a lot today. This is almost 2 pages of questions and goals.
I noted two more things that came to mind as we're discussing other topics. One is identifying entry points for new people. Let's say, are there specific projects or teams that draw in, let's say, like more new contributors, or are there any, let's say, community heroes that actually are more productive in onboarding new people? And based on that, I was wondering if we could measure collaboration levels. So are individuals or teams better than others? Not in an antagonistic way, but what are they doing better in terms of collaborating more and being more productive and, I don't know, sharing commits or ideas or decision-making processes and things like that?
So you had a lot of really good ideas, and I'm afraid my brain cannot hold all of it and type at the same time. So if
your
you
level
take
of accuracy of transcripting this is amazing.
So I wanted to invite you to add to what I already wrote here, make sure I captured your point. Especially this last one. Understand the collaboration level in our community. Is this question really what you were asking? Are there people better at sharing ideas involving others?
It could be people or specific teams that do things well in terms of collaboration. Sometimes it comes down to the 1 or 2 people that are actually more active in those, and they say the frame from the rest. But if you can like point out like 2 projects that are doing well in this, then you can like go down into those and like do further research in order to identify, hey, what are these people doing? Maybe we can bring into other projects as well and things like that.
Actually, I would be very interested in knowing what things we depend on externally, like what projects we depend on externally, right? Like KDE and GNOME depend on Wayland, or as a community, or maybe there are individual tools or something. I think that would be really nice, because this shows how much we collaborate outside our general platforms.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I was just going to mention that too. It's sort of like how much are we collaborating with other communities as well is an indicator of us being thought leaders in some way, or if there's a way to maybe measure our thought leadership.
Yeah, and I think looking at things that where in a world where the desktop has become, and kind of the app ecosystem has become almost commoditized, and it's not as exciting. It's not like the cool place to be like it was 20 years ago,
Yeah.
It's still important, but I think it is important to show how we at our level are driving important technologies at deeper levels that benefit people in many other ways. And I think you see this a lot in a lot of the containerization stuff, a lot of the even some of the kernel developments and stuff that
and vice versa, right?
Yeah.
How are we taking advantage of other communities and incorporating their work in our is an important story as well.
Yeah, so I think numbers that show how unisolated we are, I guess, would be very interesting.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, you hit the nail on the head.
Okay, so we are out of time. I want to be respectful of everyone's time. So thank you very much.
Yeah.
I think we can pick up where we left here in 2 weeks. This was really good conversation. Next time, I think we can go through this list, maybe consolidate, rearrange it so that it makes more sense, and then start actually identifying metrics and how to get the data.
Sounds good. Yeah, I think we'll need to do a lot of condensing.
Yeah, there's definitely overlap.
There is definitely going to be some iteration. And yeah.
Excellent.
Thank you so much for taking these notes. It's really helpful.
That's a Herculean note-taking task. Thank you, Georg.
Yeah.
Oh, you're welcome. My pleasure.
And translating them too.
Yeah, and just as a, as a side note, CHAOSS is looking for a community manager. If you know someone who is currently looking for a job or know someone who would be a good community manager, please send them our way.
Sounds good.
Can do.
Will do.
All right. Well,
All right.
Take care, everyone. I'm going to stop sharing, stop the recording, and end the meeting.
All right. Thanks. Thanks, guys.